Good morning. My name is Albert A. Palacios, and I am the Digital Scholarship Coordinator at Lilas Benson Latin American Studies and Collections at the University of Texas at Austin. Before I begin, I would like to thank Clayton McCarl for organizing such a wonderful virtual symposium, the Bibliographical Society of America for sponsoring it, and you, the audience, for your interest in our collective work. Today, I want to share with you my approach using machine learning technologies to examine the editing of 16th and 17th century Spanish American texts prior to their printing through two case studies. The first is my analysis of stop press edits made in a mid 16th century Mexican processional. And the second is my examination of Mexican and Limeño reissues of 17th century Iberian Relaciones or early news pieces. As most of us know, a traditional bibliographical approach has been to conduct a word by word, sometimes character by character, comparison of editions using book reproductions to discern print shop editing practices. The method I am presenting leverages mostly free, user friendly machine learning tools to facilitate arduous collation work. First, I used Transcribus to train highly accurate optical character recognition models based on colonial Mexican publications. For the 16th century case study I will present, I used a model trained on the Gothic type Juan Pablos used in Mexico City during the 1540s and 1550s. To generate an automatic transcription that would closely resemble the printed text, we made extensive use of the Latin alphabet keyboards in Transcribus to find analogs for the unique characters Pablos used to abbreviate words. I would like to acknowledge Carla Lloyd Bly, who at the time was an ARL undergraduate fellow for digital and inclusive excellence, for creating the ground truth corpus needed to develop this successful model. I developed the transcription guide you see here and augmented the training corpus to reduce the model's character error rate. For the second case I will discuss, I trained a model on Roman fonts used in 16th century and 17th century American and Iberian publications. Once I obtained a character error rate of less than 5%, I ran the models on the case study publications to extract an accurate transcription. I then used a web-based text comparison tool such as Text Compare, Diff Checker, and Go Transcript to highlight the differences between the two editions and conduct a close analysis of them to discern authorial, censorial, and editorial intent. I first applied this approach in my analysis of the stop press corrections in an early Mexican imprint on Roman Catholic processions. In circa 1543, the first bishop of Mexico, Franciscan Friar Juan de Zumarraga, created an abbreviated Spanish version of a Latin manual that defined the proper way to conduct religious processions, written by Denis Rickel, a 15th century Carthusian monk and theologian. In 1544, Zumarraga commissioned Mexico's first printer, Juan Pablos, to print the treatise. Numerous stop press corrections led to at least two distinct states of the text. The first contains 24 pages, a copy of which is at the Benson, while the second contains 31 pages, a copy of which is at the John Carter Brown Library. My objective was to understand the nature of the edits and what they said about the book's writing and printing process. The stop press interventions in Zumarraga's version of Denis Rickel's doctrine were minor. The bulk were spelling corrections and word replacements that enabled the addition of spaces and the expansion of abbreviations, edits that gave the composition breathing room and facilitated reading. A few modifications suggest that the bishop was refining the phrasing to emphasize the importance of certain concepts, such as the Holy Sacrament, and clerical responsibilities, such as the extirpation of idolatry. The prelate's most extensive edits occurred in the last segment of the first state, a defense of the Carthusians' doctrine. Zumárraga first added adjectives to the subheading to underscore the theological authority of Rickle's work, describing it as, quote, so solid, so well founded, and so Christian, end of quote. Throughout the section, he added more scriptural and legal citations and made his phrasing more pointed against bishops and clergy who tolerated frivolity in processions, strengthening his final argument. A text comparison tool was not needed to see the main difference between the two states. An appended 6-page condemnation of leisure activities occurring during Christian holidays. Zumárraga criticized the Spanish custom of holding banquets, dances, games, and other celebratory activities during days of religious observation, deeming them distractions from what Christians should be doing, acts of devotion and charity. Besides dishonoring, these ostentatious practices were also detrimental to the acculturation of indigenous people, according to the author, since they gave the impression that the festivity was more important than the underlying doctrine. Placing Dennis Rickle's prescriptions within the Novohispano context, the friar hoped to drive home the need for the book. The collation demonstrates that Zumárraga's processional was a work in progress. While Pablos printed the prelate's translation of Rickle's treatise, Zumárraga was likely at home writing the codicil that condemned celebratory excess to add it later in the printing process, occasionally coming by the workshop to make minor corrections in the forms. However, the significant stop press edits he made in his concluding defense of the doctrine imply that his writing might have started unfolding at the press. The seemingly rushed print job points to a sense of urgency in the production and dissemination of the treatise on, quote, what is commanded and forbidden in processions, especially in that of Corpus Christi, the reason why the doctrine was translated into the vernacular, end of quote. Did something particularly indecorous occur in a recent Corpus Christi feast that compelled Zumárraga to rush the printing of the processional before the next one? Only further research will tell. I am also applying this digital collation approach in the analysis of American editions of Iberian news sheets. During the 17th century, viceregal capital printers became semi-official crown propagandists through their publication of curated global news stories. They usually obtained these from the semi-annual transatlantic mail fleets in the form of printed and handwritten relaciones, which were accounts usually focused on a particular event. Once they received an imprimatur and edits from the royal government censor, printers would either reprint the relaciones as standalone publications or create noticiarios, which were non-periodic compilations of abbreviated news stories. I seek to understand, through the collation of Iberian sources and American derivatives, how viceregal authorities and printers selected, censored, and edited government-sponsored news coming from Iberia to create the sense of a unified imperial space for American audiences. As I did in the previous case, I compared the extracted text using a comparison tool to highlight differences. However, unlike the Zumárraga states, which were in the same type and only contained stop press edits, the composition of the Iberian and American news pieces varied significantly in orthography and punctuation, limiting the utility of the tool in discerning interventions. To reduce textual noise, I used commonly known natural language processing platforms like ChatGPT to modernize the orthography of the automatic transcriptions, only preserving the original capitalization of words. I then compared the modernized text with the original publications to ensure that the tool did not introduce grammar fixes as it occasionally did. Once I confirmed the integrity of the text, I created derivatives of the Iberian and American editions, removed punctuation, and brought them into the text comparison platform. The text processing filtered out analytically insignificant differences, enabling the tool to bring to the fore substantial interventions colonial printers made on Iberian news. Lastly, I categorize each highlighted difference as a minor or significant text addition, deletion, or modification, and examine the edits in relation to the publication's content and ideological context to discern possible political or composition reasons. What information did viceregal authorities and tradespeople deem essential, extraneous, or even dangerous when crafting printed political propaganda for American audiences? My goal is to understand how they censored and manipulated Iberian news for local consumption. I am currently examining 40 Mexican news sheets I have identified as being clearly derived from Iberian editions published from 1621 to 1701. Although I am only halfway through the corpus, I have identified some patterns already. For one, while Mexico City's printers typically reproduced Iberian relaciones in totem, they occasionally edited out parts to combine two or three related relaciones into one publication. The textual differences have also provided insight on how Mexican printers modified Iberian news pieces. For example, the Calderon family press, which published the bulk of Relaciones during the 17th century, often edited titles and semi regularly added superlatives to sensationalize the news. They also manipulated details to make old Iberian Relaciones current. In 1645, civilian printer Juan Sanchez published a story on the discovery of copper engravings that prophesied the discovery of a monster. Likely getting a hold of Sanchez's publication in 1648, the Calderon shop in Mexico City changed the year on the title and once in the text from 1645 to 1648 and deleted the original year in another instance within the text. The shop went as far as modifying the supposed prophecy. According to the original edition, the prophecy on the copper plates stated that, well, when you count 45 points, presumably on the monster, there will be peace throughout earth, end of quote, which the author later interpreted to symbolize the year 1645. In both instances where the author mentions these points, the Calderon workshop changed it to 48 to reflect the year it published the account. In this particular case, the currency of the religious message on the relación, not the historical accuracy, was of utmost importance for the Mexican workshop, falsifying historical context to promote a Christian message to its Novohispano audience. I am concurrently examining Lima's publication of Relaciones to identify editorial interventions there and conduct a comparative analysis of censorial and printing practices in both viceregal capitals. Thus far, it generally appears that tradespeople in the Americas modified original texts not only to achieve typesetting goals, but to also clarify, sensationalize, or even obfuscate details in important news. The collation of the Peruvian news output has already brought to the fore political censorship. In 1626, Jerónimo de Contreras' print shop in Lima reprinted an Iberian Relación on the flooding of the Guadalquivir River and the destruction it caused in Seville. The tradesman, or more likely the viceregal censor, omitted an unflattering description of Spaniards taking advantage of each other during the crisis. This undoubtedly, this and undoubtedly other cases will provide insight on the type of information viceregal authorities deemed threatening to the crown's image and ultimately sovereignty in the Americas. And with this, I will end. My hope is that the method I have shown can help other researchers expedite the tedious and time consuming work that is often required to study printing states and editions. Or at the very least, I hope that the presentation helped demystify the use of machine learning tools. Thank you for your attention, and I look forward to your questions.